"Mama, I'm hungry," little Emily whispered, tugging on Sarah's sleeve as they sat in the small diner where Sarah worked double shifts just to keep the lights on. Sarah forced a smile, brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "I know, sweetheart. We'll eat soon." The truth was, she barely had enough to afford a meal for the both of them. Rent was overdue, daycare costs were piling up, and her manager had just slashed her hours. Then, out of the corner of her eye, Sarah noticed a man at the back of the diner. He was dressed in ragged clothes, his beard unkempt, and his eyes filled with exhaustion as he clutched his stomach. He looked hungry. She sighed, looking down at the meager plate in front of her. Her and Emily's shared dinner. It wasn't much, but something inside her told her to do the right thing. "Excuse me, sir," she said softly, carrying her plate over. "You look like you could use a meal." The man's tired eyes widened. "Are you sure?" Sarah nodded. "Yeah, you need it more than I do." He hesitated for a moment before accepting the plate with shaky hands. "Thank you. You don't know what this means to me." Little did Sarah know, the stranger she just fed wasn't just any man. He was someone who would change her life forever. The man devoured the food as if he hadn't eaten in days. Sarah watched him with quiet satisfaction, feeling good about her decision, even though it meant going hungry herself. Emily, curious as ever, leaned in. "What's your name, mister?" The man looked up, startled. James. James Carter." Sarah offered a gentle smile. "Nice to meet you, James. I'm Sarah, and this is my daughter, Emily." James nodded, swallowing the last bite. "Sarah, you have no idea how much this means to me. I've been down on my luck lately." Sarah sighed. "I get it. Life can be unfair." James studied her for a moment, his eyes sharp despite his worn-out appearance. "You have a good heart, Sarah. Not many people would do what you just did." She shrugged. "I believe kindness always finds its way back." James smiled at that, but he didn't say anything more. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled $5 bill. "Here, for the meal." Sarah shook her head. "No, keep it. You need it more than I do." James hesitated, but then a knowing look crossed his face, as if he had just made an important decision. "You're a rare kind of person, Sarah." At that moment, the diner door swung open, and Sarah's manager, Mr. Lewis, stormed in. "Sarah, what are you doing? Are you seriously giving away food for free?" Sarah's heart pounded. She needed this job. Without it, she and Emily would be out on the streets. James watched the situation unfold, something unreadable in his expression. Little did Sarah know, this moment would mark the beginning of an unbelievable twist in her life. Sarah turned to face her boss, her pulse racing. "Mr. Lewis, I was just trying to help. He was hungry." Mr. Lewis crossed his arms, his expression cold. "This is a business, not a charity, Sarah. If you want to feed the homeless, do it on your own time, not with my food." Sarah swallowed hard. She couldn't afford to lose this job, not with Emily depending on her. "I understand, sir. It won't happen again." James slowly stood up, brushing the crumbs off his jacket. "It's my fault," he said calmly. "I insisted she take my money, but she refused." Mr. Lewis scoffed. "Of course she did, always making excuses." His glare bore into Sarah. "You're on thin ice. One more mistake and you're out." Tears stung the back of Sarah's eyes, but she held them in. "Yes, sir." Mr. Lewis grunted and walked away, leaving Sarah standing there humiliated. Emily clung to her hand, sensing her mother's distress. James sighed. "I didn't mean to get you in trouble." Sarah forced a small smile. "It's okay. I'd rather get in trouble for doing the right thing than look the other way." James tilted his head slightly, observing her. "You're a strong woman, Sarah." She shrugged. "I have to be." He looked at Emily, then back at Sarah, as if weighing something in his mind. "You work hard, don't you?" Sarah nodded. "Every single day." A thoughtful expression crossed James's face, but he said nothing more. Instead, he reached into his pocket, pulled out a business card, and placed it on the table. "If you ever need something, give me a call." Sarah glanced at the card. The name on it made her blink in shock. James Carter, CEO of Carter Enterprises. Her breath hitched. This was no ordinary homeless man. This was a billionaire, and she had no idea how much her kindness was about to change her life. Sarah's hands trembled as she picked up the card, her mind racing. James Carter. CEO? The name was familiar. She had seen it on the news, in business magazines. He was one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the country. She looked up, expecting James to smirk or take back the card, but he simply smiled. "Surprised?" Sarah nodded slowly. Why didn't you say anything?" James chuckled. "Would you have treated me the same if you knew?" Sarah opened her mouth, but hesitated. Maybe she would have been intimidated. Maybe she wouldn't have dared to strike up a conversation. But she had helped him without expecting anything in return. "I don't judge people by their money," she finally said. His smile widened. "That's exactly why I'm giving you this." He tapped the card in her hand. "Come by my office tomorrow. I have a business opportunity for you." Sarah's heart pounded. I don't know anything about business." James shook his head. "You know kindness, integrity, hard work. I need people like that in my company." Sarah still couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Are you offering me a job?" James leaned forward slightly. "Maybe something even better." Emily tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, are we getting a new job?" Sarah smiled down at her daughter, brushing a strand of hair from her face. I don't know yet, sweetheart." James stood up, stretching. "Think about it. No pressure." He pulled out a few $100 bills and placed them on the table. "For the meal, and for you and Emily." Sarah gasped, shaking her head. "I can't take this." "Consider it an investment," James said with a wink before turning toward the door. "See you tomorrow, Sarah." With that, he walked out, leaving Sarah sitting in stunned silence. She glanced at Emily, then at the business card in her hand. Tomorrow could change everything. And for the first time in a long time, Sarah dared to hope. The next morning, Sarah stood outside the towering glass building, gripping Emily's small hand. The golden letters on the entrance read, "Carter Industries." Her stomach twisted in knots. Was this real? Or had she imagined it? Emily squeezed her hand. "Mommy, are we going in?" Sarah took a deep breath. "Yes, baby, we are." As they stepped inside, the lobby's marble floors gleamed under the soft lights. The receptionist, a well-dressed woman with a professional smile, greeted them. "Good morning. Do you have an appointment?" Sarah swallowed hard. I think so. James Carter asked me to come." The woman's eyes widened slightly, and she immediately picked up the phone. "One moment, please." Within seconds, an assistant appeared, dressed in a sharp suit. "Ms. Miller, Mr. Carter is expecting you. Please, follow me." Sarah followed the assistant into a sleek office with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. James stood by the window, hands in his pockets, gazing out. When he turned, his smile was warm. "Sarah, you came?" She nodded nervously. "I wasn't sure if this was real." James chuckled. "It's very real." He gestured for her to sit. I've been thinking a lot since last night. I run dozens of businesses, Sarah, but I've been struggling with one in particular, our community outreach program. I need someone with a heart like yours to help run it. Sarah's breath hitched. Me? But I don't have any experience. James leaned forward. You have something better. You know what it's like to struggle. You know what kindness means when you have nothing. That's what this program needs. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. You're offering me a job? James smiled. I'm offering you a fresh start, a stable income, benefits for you and Emily, and a chance to make a real difference. Sarah glanced down at her daughter, who was looking around the grand office with wide eyes. A lump formed in her throat. This was more than a job. It was hope. It was a new beginning. She looked back at James and whispered, Yes, I'll do it. And in that moment, Sarah Miller's life changed forever. 6 months later, Sarah stood at the same diner where her life had changed forever. But this time she wasn't wearing an apron. She wasn't rushing between tables. She wasn't worrying about how to pay rent. Instead, she sat at a booth by the window, dressed in a stylish yet simple blazer, reviewing documents for the Carter Community Initiative. The program had already helped dozens of struggling single parents find stable jobs, housing, and education opportunities, and she was the one running it. A small hand tugged at her sleeve. Mommy, can I have a milkshake? Emily asked, swinging her legs happily. Sarah smiled. Of course, sweetheart. As the waitress walked over, Sarah glanced up and froze. It was Lisa, the same exhausted young woman who had once been her co-worker, now looking just as overwhelmed as Sarah had been that night. Lisa's smile was tired. Hey, what can I get you? Sarah studied her for a moment before making a decision. Lisa, she said gently, how long have you been working double shifts? Lisa blinked, clearly caught off guard. Months now. Why? Sarah reached into her purse, pulled out a business card, and slid it across the table. I think I can help. Lisa frowned at the card, reading the words aloud. Carter Community Initiative, Sarah Miller, Director. She looked back up, confusion written all over her face. Wait, you? You work with Mr. Carter? Sarah smiled. I do. And I'm looking for someone who knows what it's like to work hard and keep pushing forward, no matter how tough life gets. Sound familiar? Lisa's hands trembled slightly as she picked up the card. Are you offering me a job? Sarah nodded. I'm offering you a fresh start. For a moment, Lisa didn't say anything. Then, just like Sarah had done that day in Carter's office, she whispered, Yes. Sarah leaned back, watching Lisa walk away with newfound hope in her eyes. The cycle of kindness had come full circle. And this was just the beginning.